Nice to have you. And the debate, historic presidential debate between former President Donald Trump and current President Joe Biden was held last week. Before the debate, though, you penned an op-ed in the Washington Post entitled this: "Don't waste the Biden-Trump debate, make them answer this question." And the question was on the national debt. And as we know, as the debate played out, there's a lot more of conversation of how things were said versus what was said. But I do want to start with substance here. There was a question on the national debt. What do you think? How do you think the question was posed? And what did you think of both presidents' answers?
They dodged the question. I've been relatively good at dodging questions myself, so I know what I'm seeing. They didn't answer the question, and it's relatively easy to make it sound like you really care when you don't. The debt has been going up steadily. We now, the interest on the debt is larger than the Department of Defense, and it's getting larger. So, and it's doable. And we were paying off debt when I left the Senate. It was hard. Republicans had to do things they didn't want to do, and Democrats had to do things they didn't want to do. But it worked. And then we went right back to, if you just cut the taxes a bunch and make people happy with tax cuts, it'll solve the problem. It didn't. We're right back where we were before. And now, unfortunately, it seems to me one of the big problems is, especially in the political class, they just don't seem to have a sense of urgency to solve it.
And let's talk about exactly where we are in terms of the debt. According to the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, they estimate President Trump was responsible for approximately $8.4 trillion of national debt. And then the same committee has estimated that President Biden, at this point in his presidency, has approved $4.3 trillion of debt. So has any president between Biden and Trump showed any type of leadership when it comes to the national debt?
Well, there's nobody between yes, George Herbert Walker Bush did, Bill Clinton did, and between the two of them, we started off with about 4% of our economy being funded every year with debt. And at the end of those two presidents' terms, 12 years, we were paying debt down. We were actually paying off debt not that long ago. So it's absolutely doable, but you got to be willing to do that. As I said, Republicans don't want to raise taxes, Democrats don't want to cut spending, and unless you do a little bit of both, you don't get the job done. So and what's happened, I think, especially in the last 10 or 12 years, is a growing number of people, incorrectly in my view, saying debt doesn't matter. They'll say things like, well, it's about the same as it was after the Second World War. Well, gosh, after the Second World War, we had used that debt not only to win the war, but we used the debt to invest in productive businesses, part of the defense industry, and lots of non-defense businesses that were invested in as a consequence of that debt. And we began rapidly to pay the debt down because our economy was booming. So it's not the same thing. I think the best way of seeing it, I think, is you look at the individual programs themselves. So what I would have preferred that Dana and Jake had asked is, what do you say? What do you say to a 60-year-old? Your plan, which is the Do Nothing plan, the Do Nothing plan has a 17% cut in benefits for anybody 60 years of old and under. And the younger you get, the worse it is. So what do you say to that 60-year-old? That under current law, they're going to get a 17% cut in their benefits. And they say, well, we're not for a 17 cut. They'll deny they're for it. But the current Do Nothing plan does exactly that. And part of the problem, Brittany, is that politicians don't have to face that question. They don't have to face and explain the consequences of doing nothing to Medicare, Social Security, and other people who depend upon these programs.
What's your answer to that question then? When you hear someone say debt doesn't matter, I mean, it's $1 trillion problem. It sounds like it does matter. So how does it matter, and what are the consequences of this sky-high debt?
All of us away from Washington, D.C. understand that debt has to be either paid back or somehow you got to reduce the value of the debt. You got to get some of it forgiven. And that basically means devaluing our currency. So you got to pay it back. And the Chinese have $1 trillion worth of debt. Other foreign countries have $7 or $8 trillion. We talk all the time about wanting to be strong and want to get back to where we were before. Well, we got a long ways to go to make America great again when it comes to the amount of federal debt that we've got. and it hinders our capacity to do the things that we know need to be done. So it's not a trivial matter, and it's just going to take, let me put it this way. On the 6th of June this year, we celebrated the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And anybody that watched that was quite moved by these old men coming up and saying, I was here, and Jim died, and John died, and Bill died. But we did it for the future. We didn't expect anything in return. We weren't looking for anything. They were completely unselfish. And it's going to take that kind of attitude on behalf of the country to get it done. Because you're going to have to do some things, and some groups are going to be very unpopular.